If your family is anything like mine, we've been watching Black Panther. So the DVD came out, or maybe you bought it on some streaming device, but we've been watching it a number of times. And one thing I'll say is that the action doesn't stop. There's not a good place to stop watching. But the other is that it got me thinking about this idea of using what's in front of us for raising equity, right? Like, how do we use current events, what is in our natural environment? And I think that's important because oftentimes we feel like we've got to intentionally get out a book or do a lesson or do something formal. It can be natural. It can be part of what happens. And so with Black Panther, I've seen a few opportunities for raising equity. The first thing I noticed was that this was a great opportunity to remind my children that Africa is not a country. There's actually a book with that title because so often people think about Africa as this monolith and don't realize the variability of the continent. And also to talk about the history, the rich history of the continent. You can be really clear with your children that that's where humans started, that is the cradle of civilization. You also can teach lessons around math and science and the ideas that started in Africa, the continent of Africa. And you can also use it as an opportunity to talk about Wakanda as a contradiction of what we see of the continent of Africa because of colonization, because of enslavement, because of the slave trade. And it's an opportunity to right some of the educational wrongs that happen in our system. It's an opportunity to talk about the richness of the continent. It might not be vibranium, but there is richness in the resources that are present on the continent. And there's a way in which some of that is happening again, that colonization and the kind of taking over of resources on the continent. The other piece that you could talk about with your children is this idea of identity and what we think about people in terms of how they think about themselves. I've done a whole post on Black Panther and identity, so you can see that. If you have a Black child, to talk with your child about the different ways in which Blackness is conceived in the United States versus the diaspora, or not even versus the fact that we have a common connection, and what does that look like? How do we live that out in our lives, or how do we understand that in our identities? And the last piece you could talk about is power, right? So Killmonger is this character that we feel really drawn to. And one of my children actually said as we were watching it, I understand. I would want to take everything down too. I see why he'd want to send the weapons out into the world. And we really had a conversation about how do you disrupt corrupted power? What does it look like? Killmonger has this kind of romanticized idea about freeing all Black people in the diaspora, but he's also really destructive. He requires them to burn the ritual gardens and claims that there will be no other Black Panther after him. So this way in which we understand why he's angry and his desire to have Wakanda help, and that corrupt power and absolute power isn't maybe the answer. So to talk to your children about that, what does power mean? To not shy away from it, but to use it responsibly. What does it mean within the Black community? These are everyday questions that are happening, and we could be talking to our children. And if you don't have a Black child, you can still have a conversation about power. How are you as a family acknowledging your power? How are you shirking away from it? How are you using it responsibly? So there are lots of different opportunities I think current events can give us to engage our children in conversations, that we don't always have to go create a lesson plan. It sometimes just happens right in front of us.